Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Commander Pod, your Magic the Gathering podcast for all things Commander. I'm Spencer Simpson.
And I'm Kelton Howell. We received some requests to do some deck techs on the channel. So last week we did a deck tech on my Brago deck, which is a Brago Artifacts Blink deck. So go check that out if you're interested. But this week we're going to be covering Spencer's Tana and Tevesh Tiny Token, or the Tana Tevesh Tiny Token Tour deck.
Yes, the Tana Tevesh Tiny Token Tour. And we should probably just start off by reading Tana and Tevesh. I had that little marked for later, but I think we better kick it off because I don't know if they're particularly well known as commanders. I know they both see play in CDH, but maybe not together as much.
Yeah, and this is like a casual version of the deck, I think, which is really cool. I really like how this one turned out.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited. So I'll read Tana if you want to read Tevesh. I'm giving you the longer one.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Tana the Bloodsower is 2 and a red and a green, so 4 total mana, for a 2/2 elf druid with trample, and whenever Tana the Bloodsower deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green saproling creature tokens, and it has partner.
Tevesh has partner as well, and can be your commander, which is important because it's a planeswalker. It's 4 and a black for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. The +2 ability is create 2 0/1 black Thrall creature tokens. The +1 ability is you may sacrifice another creature or planeswalker. If you do, you draw 2 cards, then draw another card if the sacrifice permanent was a commander. What a crazy plus ability on a planeswalker. And then the -10 is gain control of all commanders. Put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control.
Yeah, the thing that, when I first read Tevesh Zot, I thought, this doesn't look that good, because you have to, like, sacrifice a creature, and the fact that it says, if it was a commander, makes you, I think, automatically jump to, well, I'm going to sacrifice my commander, I don't want to do that, to draw the additional card, but the fact that it's a plus ability to draw cards by sacrificing any creature is just incredible, because you're making Tevesh harder to kill, and drawing cards each turn, which is pretty wild. So,
awesome.
Let's get into the Tana Tevesh Tiny Token Tour. So the reason I built this deck is because I wanted to build a Jund deck. And I wanted to build a Jund deck because I really like all of the things that Jund is trying to do, like sacrifice things for value and reanimate big threats, and go fast, which is something that I'm less comfortable with, but still is exciting and fun to me. Which is why I typically play Sultai, because it goes a little bit. Decks. Yeah, it goes a little bit less fast, and you can protect yourself a little bit more than you can in Jund. I think Jund sacrifices some of that protection for some more speed. That being said, we're not trying to like turbo out a win in this deck. This is still a very casual deck, but it will go faster than some more controlling strategies. So, but I wanted to make...
You took a few tries at building a Jund deck. This was not your first attempt at building this Jund deck.
No, yeah. So I really wanted to build a mid-power Jund deck, and I attempted with several different commanders. And what I found was that some of them felt too similar to decks that I already had, and so I wasn't super interested in building those because I really liked the decks I already had, and I'm trying to build a more diverse deck pool. And then other ones were very cool commanders, but felt a little clunky at lower power levels, and so it was hard to like pull them down to be mid power without them, doing broken things.
So this was your third or fourth version of a Jund deck, if I recall.
Yeah, I think so. I think the first one I built was like Henzi Toolbox Torre, which was very cool, which I liked, but it felt very similar to my Sidisi deck. It was like a very creature-heavy deck, but just in Jund. And then the next one I built was Dargo and Ikra Shadiki, which is a partner deck. And Dargo, if you've not played against Dargo before, is
so
very
scary.
broken. Yeah, very broken. Yeah. And does a lot of like sacrifice shenanigans. I guess I better read Dargo. I'll read Dargo really quick just so we can demonstrate how broken Dargo is. Dargo the Shipwrecker is 6 and a red for a 7/5, and you're like, holy cow, 7 mana for a commander. But he says, as an additional cost to cast this spell, you may sacrifice any number of artifacts and or creatures. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each permanent sacrifice this way, and 2 less to cast for each other artifact or creature you sacrifice this turn, and it has trample and it has partner. So the way Dargo ends up playing is that you play like treasures, and then you sacrifice your treasure, and it pays for 3 of his mana cost, right? You get a red,
really good.
and then it discounts him by 2. And then you do broken stuff like playing Phyrexian Altar, which is a 3-mana artifact that lets you sacrifice a creature to add 1 mana of any color. And as soon as you've decreased his cost by enough, I should say this cost reduction of 2 also pays for commander tax. So as soon as you've reduced it to just 1 red mana, you can cast Dargo and then sacrifice him to Phyrexian Altar. And because you've sacrificed him, it reduces his cost by 2, nullifying commander tax, and so you just get to cast him infinitely from the command zone. And so you can do all sorts of broken stuff like that. And I found myself being just very tempted to do that, and so it was hard to pull it down towards the mid-power level, because that's like the cool thing that you do with Dargo, right? And so it felt, I don't know, it was kind of tough to not play the more boasted stuff. And so then I landed on like Slimefoot and Squee, which is a very cool Reanimator strategy and a Saproling commander, kind of, both of them. And Slimefoot and Squee, do you want to read Slimefoot and Squee for us really quick?
Yeah, I will. I do really like this card. This one was from March of the Machine. It was from it was like the commander, one of the commander promos, right? That you'd get in pre-release packs from March of the Machine.
Yeah, it was one of the ones you couldn't play in your pre-release, but
it was one
I was
always
most
so confusing.
Yeah, for sure. And it was one I was actually most excited about from that like mini commander set that came with the pre-release packs. It's really cool.
Yeah. So this is black, red, green for a 3/3 fungus goblin. When Slimefoot and Squee enters the battlefield or attacks, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. And then you pay 1 black, red, green and sacrifice a Saproling to return Slimefoot and Squee and up to 1 other target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And you activate only as a sorcery. That's really cool.
It's really freaking cool because like you play him on turn 3 or whatever, right? And then if anyone removes him, you still have those Saprolings hanging around to just like bring him back and whatever else happens to be in your graveyard. I think it's really cool, and I may end up building a Slimefoot and Squee deck because this kind of is the embodiment of the stuff I really like in
but
Commander.
This did make it into the 99 of Tana and Tevesh, right?
It super did. Yeah, well, so what ended up happening was I built Slimefoot and Squee, and I started building it like a Jund All-Stars deck where I was playing a lot of my favorite Jund commanders and cards that I felt like I didn't want to actually build as commanders because of the aforementioned temptations or hindrances. And so it was kind of a Saproling deck and a Reanimator deck, right? And I tried to put Tana and Tevesh in the 99 because I thought they were very cool, they're part of the All-Stars of Jund, and Tana makes Saprolings. But what ended up happening is Tevesh is still very good, but Tana felt less good because she's a 4-mana 2/2 with Trample, which basically makes her a vanilla 2/2. And
you really have to build around Tana to make her effective.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided to do some shuffling around and bring them to the forefront to be the commanders, which did 2 things. It let me build around Tana more, and it also gave me perpetual access to Tevesh, who is a very good card draw engine. That being said, we're going to talk about the play patterns of this deck, and Tevesh is less of a like key piece in this deck and more of a, oh no, I didn't find anything else, we're going to play Tevesh and recover, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I'm really excited about this deck. So the game plan of this deck is that we want to ramp on turn 1 or 2, play Tana on turn 3, on turn 2 if we're very lucky and hit Soul Ring or another one of our fast ramp pieces, which we'll talk about later. And then we pray that Tana doesn't get removed before turn 4 when we can actually attack with Tana. It's kind of our plan.
Nice.
But, so this is a casual deck, right? That prey strategy isn't really the best. And even though this is a casual deck, one thing that really matters with this deck is turn order and being aware of turn order. So we don't always want to just run out Tana on turn 3. For example, if we're in the 4th position, right, in turn order, and we run out Tana on turn 3, what we're doing is we're playing Tana into the rest of our opponents who are untapping with 5 mana available if they've ramped on any of their prior turns, at least, right? Yep. And probably a removal spell that they're ready to use on Tana because we've played her on turn 3 as fast as possible.
Yeah, so as somebody who also has a few commanders that have combat damage triggers, it's worrisome to play it out and not have any protection available. So, especially where turn order matters, does it change your play pattern? I mean, like if you, depending on how the game is developing, and then also what order you are in turn order, how does that change how you're playing your commander?
Yeah, so this deck, I should say, doesn't run any shoes. It doesn't run boots or greaves, which I'm considering. I might put them in there just because I think they're very good, especially boots. Greaves less so because there are some things I'm trying to do to buff Tana and make her bigger.
Yeah, you do need to be able to target her.
Yeah. So, but boots I might put in there. But the way it changes it is that you'll either just play Tana on a later turn when you have like an additional mana and potentially a protection spell to keep her alive, or if you can play her and attack with her on the same turn, hoping people don't have like interaction up and want to spend it on Tana, because we have some haste enablers and some things that will buff her and help her to get in for damage on the turn that you play her. And so then if that all happens, right, if turn 2 we ramp, turn 3 we play Tana ideally, turn 4 we're trying to attack with Tana and we're trying to make her bigger, because like we said, a 2/2 is just not going to cut it against most board states. It's like, even on turn 4, likely, there might be one of your opponents who is undefended, right? But I'm sorry, there's a fly. I hope this, I'm pointing it out, and I'm now worried people are going to see it, but I just can't stop seeing it in my video in the background. In any case, you're trying to swing through with Tana and make her bigger to do the damage, right? Because 2/2 is not going to make it through most of the time.
Yeah. Nope, that's it. That sounds like a good game plan to me.
Yep.
You're going to make a bunch of Saprolings, right?
Yep, and then you make a bunch of Saprolings. And we'll talk about some of the other cards that make that a good strategy as we get to some of the game plan. But we should, following our template from last time, talk about power level first. So the power level of this deck, like I said, I was trying to build a mid-power Jund deck, and I really think I was able to land there with this deck. It feels exceptionally mid. It feels very mid-power, but it feels very fun to play as well, which I was really happy about. It doesn't have any infinite combos, and it primarily plays like a Tana Voltron deck with some alternate commanders that are able to continue the strategy if Tana gets removed too much. And like I said, Tevesh is not a key part of the game plan necessarily. He can be, just not the way I pilot the deck, but is a very good backup plan in the command zone in the case that Tana is getting just like removed over and over again because people don't want to see her connecting.
Yeah, I do think that's really interesting. And I'm curious, you also wrote on here that you play Tevesh mostly for color. I'm curious to know like what black pieces are really integral to this game plan in the deck. But I do love the idea that he is kind of like the recovery plan, right? So you're trying to go really fast with Tana, generate a very wide board state, and then if somebody board wipes, you can rebuild quicker because you have Tevesh in the command zone.
Yeah, exactly. It makes the deck more resilient than if it were just Tana. Then like some of your other glass cannon-y decks, which this is not particularly glass cannon-y. I think it's somewhat resilient in the strategy itself, but Tevesh certainly contributes to that.
Cool.
When we get to some of the more specific cards, you'll see why I liked having black in the deck. But I guess as like a little teaser to that point, I already have a Gruul deck. I like Gruul. I really like playing black. I think black is one of my favorite colors to play in Magic. And I really like Rakdos and Golgari. I think those are very cool. Those are doing the cool sacrifice and reanimate strategies that I really like. And there's less reanimating going on in this deck, but because we're making so many Saproling tokens, hopefully, we've included some of those pieces to help us sacrifice them and get value out of them outside of just being able to swing in as creatures.
Cool. Awesome.
So let's move on to the Rule Zero questions here. So last time I asked Kelton them as if we were sitting down at a table.
Do you want to do that again? Should I ask you those questions?
You can ask me the questions. I didn't feel like the contrived conversational nature of that was maybe the best way to go about it in hindsight. But I'd be happy for you to ask me the questions, and then we can have conversations about them.
Excellent. Yeah, we are learning. So the first one is, how dense and efficient is your interaction?
Yeah, so we have 11 pieces of interaction in this deck. 3 of them are just protection / buff pieces for Tana. They kind of do pull double duty, but they're just trying to keep Tana alive. And we'll talk about some of those specifics. But it runs 0 board wipes. And then outside of that, there's some efficient. Yeah, we really care about our board state in this deck. We really care about keeping it alive. And a board wipe is going to hurt us more than anyone else for the most part. Yeah, exactly. Because we can deal with other decks that are going wide. Because I think like the goal is that we would be able to go more wide. And any decks that are going tall, we have some decent spot removal for those. And we're going wide, so we can hopefully just like chump with a bunch of small creatures if that's necessary. And then we have some pretty efficient interaction, but only like 5 or 6 pieces of like pretty efficient spot removal. The rest of it's just kind of trying to contribute to our game plan of keeping Tana alive. The next one here is...
Sorry, I'm slacking on my job. My job is to read the question. Sorry. So the second one is, how dense and fast is your ramp?
So, like I was saying earlier, this deck doesn't play anything that's a 3 mana or more as far as ramp pieces goes. So it's playing mostly 2 mana rocks and land ramp spells, and then some of the best dorks available in the colors. The best, or at least for color fixing and making sure that I'm getting the right colors of mana. And then it's playing 2 pieces of fast mana. One of them is Soul Ring, which is somewhat negligible because Soul Ring's in every deck, so we're not going to count that one.
Sure.
And the other one being Tinderwall, and I'll just read Tinderwall really quickly. Tinderwall is 1 green for a 0/3 plant wall with Defender, and it has Sacrifice Tinderwall, add red to your mana pool, and then it also has red Sacrifice Tinderwall. It deals 2 damage to target creature it is blocking, which is less relevant. But both of those are 2 situations in which we can cast a turn 2 Tana, which will put us pretty significantly ahead in whatever game we're playing. So, and then outside of that, it's not, the deck goes relatively fast, but it's not like trying to assemble any sort of combo. It's just trying to get Tana out as quickly as possible because she's so...
Just because you need her to have as open of a board as possible to
attack. She's so itty-bitty. She's so teeny. Yeah. We need to get through for damage.
I don't buy it. The next question is, how efficient is your card advantage?
Okay, so in terms of efficiency, we don't ask about density typically, but I do have it listed here. We won 15 pieces, not including Tevesh, which is a lot.
That's a lot. I mean... 15 is on the high end of what we would consider in a mid-power commander deck.
Yeah.
But then you also have Tevesh in the command zone, which is card draw, which counts for several for the most part because it's always available to you.
Yeah. This I may be able to cut down on a little bit. I think it might be a little excessive for the deck, but a lot of these are pulling double duty, where they're not necessarily just drawing cards. Like a lot of them are on creatures that I'll mention one right now. It is Yawgmoth Thran Physician, which is one of the reasons we wanted to put black in the deck. Will you read Yawgmoth? I feel like I'm talking way too much.
Yawgmoth Thran Physician is 2 black for a 2/4 human cleric. He has protection from humans. He has the activated ability, pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature to put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and then draw a card. He also has the activated ability, black, discard a card, proliferate.
Yeah, so the proliferate's not going to come up in this deck very much. It can, though, because we're trying to put often counters on Tana. Yeah, but you can see how it's pulling double duty here, where we're able to sacrifice our Saprolings for value and draw cards, and also kind of count as some removal. So it's not purely in there as just a one-off draw spell or a draw engine. It's being able to do several things. And also has protection from humans, which I forget about every time I read this card. I don't think if I were to think of this card from memory, I don't think I would ever say, oh, it has protection from humans.
And it has protection from humans, yeah.
But so it is a lot, and I think we could probably cut it down a little bit, but as we talk through this, that may not be the case. I've not felt it to be excessive, especially because we're just trying to continuously build a big board state, and so we're just trying to churn through our deck.
Well, I was going to ask if that has to do with the speed of the deck, and that a lot of your deck is just stuff to put on Tana or to buff Tana. Like, do you frequently find yourself emptying your hand quickly and needing to refill?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it feels like if Tana gets removed, what we want is to be able to never miss a land drop, so that we can continuously cast Tana, and hit maybe several more ramp spells so we can continually cast Tana, because she costs 4, which means she gets removed twice, and now she's an 8 mana commander, which is a lot.
An 8 mana 2/2.
Yeah, an 8 mana 2/2, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it hasn't felt excessive in that we want to have a full hand and options at all times because of the speed we're trying to move at and the lack of protection that Jund offers, because we're not moving fast enough for Jund to be like oppressive and not need the protection.
Yep.
Like I think if I were to swap some of them out, it would be I probably could. But I think the best way to get away with swapping out some of these draw effects would be to power up the deck and include some things like deflecting swat, or things that are like generically
more interaction to protect Tana.
Yeah, exactly.
Because right now you only have 11 pieces of interaction.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it'd probably be a 1-for-1 trade that direction, or some sort of trade that way. That may not even be accurate, but so far it's not felt excessive, even though it looks excessive. And again, because Tevesh is a backup plan, we're not getting Tevesh out as an engine. Sorry, I'm talking about this way too much.
The next question is, how fast is your mana base?
Pretty standard for our playgroup, which is it has a single land that enters tapped, which is a Triome, which is still very good. So we're like we said, we're gonna keep saying it. We believe that people should play good mana base because we want to play Magic. Yeah. We just want to play Magic. Okay. Proxium. Who cares?
The next question is, how dense and efficient are your combos?
So this deck has no infinite combos, no combos that go near infinite, and mostly just has lots of very good synergies. So if I happen to get out something like, so for example, it runs Korvold, Fakehurst King, which is a very powerful card, very synergistic card. I'll read Korvold really quickly. Korvold, Fakehurst King is 2 black, red, green for a legendary creature, Dragon Noble, 4/4 with flying. And whenever Korvold Fakehurst King enters the battlefield or attacks, sacrifice another permanent. Whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Korvold and draw a card. So there are only, I should count, but off the top of my head, I can think of 2 cards that allow me to sacrifice creatures at will repeatably in this deck. And so for me to have some sort of combo, I have to have a lot of Saprolings, I have to have Korvold out, and I have to have one of those cards out as well. And then things start to get pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. And so that's like some of the combos in the deck, but I don't have no tutors to find them. And like I said, I only have like 2 pieces that will sacrifice creatures repeatably at will. And so it's very synergistic in that Korvold's going to be a great piece of the deck because I'll draw, a couple cards a turn cycle. I can maybe sacrifice 1. If I happen to have Tevesh out at the same time, I'll draw 3 cards, and that's great. And Korvold gets bigger. But things aren't typically going to get super out of control in this deck, combo-wise.
Yeah. Cool. You'll just make a lot of Saprolings sometimes.
Yeah, just make a lot of Saprolings that generate value from dealing combat damage or dying, and then Tana can get very big. Even though she's itty-bitty. And then
you keep trying to downplay Tana.
I might play you or some of these people at some point, and I want Tana to stick on board.
So our last question is, how friendly is your strategy?
I would argue that it is a pretty friendly strategy in that it mostly cares about what I'm doing, which I think generally does lend to a friendly strategy as long as what you're doing isn't entirely broken.
Totally busted.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a very controlling deck. It's just, buff Tana and swing. We're mostly just trying to build a board pretty quickly and win through having an army of Saprolings, potentially winning through commander damage with Tana, or pinging everyone to death through Saprolings entering or leaving the battlefield.
Nice. And what turn are you trying to win by with this deck?
Turn 8 to 10, I think. Cool. And to be honest, I copied this script over from Brago, and I think 8 to 10 is pretty accurate for most mid-power decks in my opinion. Not that games will end turn 8 to 10, but if left unchecked, I think any mid-power deck should be able to try to win by that turn. Right?
Yeah, like in gold fishing, like you could maybe like 25-50% of the time present a pretty convincing win condition by turn 8.
Yeah, that's been my experience so far. And then that turns into later turns, but like in gold fishing,
because
that's
people are going to interact.
Yeah, exactly. So the next thing is vegetables, right? We're moving
let's
on
jump into the vegetables. So this is ramp, card advantage, and interaction.
Yes. So we talked about this a little bit. With ramp, we're not casting anything that costs more than 3 mana because why would we in this instance? Because we're ramping to Tana. We're not really ramping to anything bigger necessarily.
You just want that turn 3 Tana.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, depending on turn order, potentially not turn 3 Tana, but we want to be able to cast Tana on turn 3 if the opportunity presents itself, whether or not we do situationally. And so we're playing like Sakura Tribe Elder is one of the ones we're playing. Pretty classic.
This one.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is 1 and a green for a 1/1 Snake Shaman. With the activated ability, sacrifice Sakura Tribe Elder, search your library for a basic land card, then put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle.
Yeah, a classic ramp piece that also happens to synergize with any of our things that care about things being sacrificed at any point.
Nice.
Just a great spell. The other ones we're running are Nature's Lore and like effects. So things like Farseek and 3 Visits. We'll just read Nature's Lore here because though they're not identical, I mean 3 Visits is identical, but
practically the same.
The same. Nature's Lore is 1 and a green for a sorcery. Search your library for a forest card and then put that on the battlefield, then shuffle. 3 Visits is the exact same thing, and then Farseek is anything but a forest card, but it enters tap. So
sure. Yeah.
But I really wanted to take advantage of the sacredness of lands in Commander and the fact that I'm playing green, which I think everyone should do. I don't know where I stand on the mass land destruction debate in Commander, but where it stands currently, land ramp I think is like the best type of ramp you can be playing because it's never going to die to a Vandal Blast or a board wipe.
Sure.
For the most part, right?
Only if you're playing against my AC deck and I play Sundering.
Yes. Yep.
I always want to say Upheaval because that's the card I want to be playing in that deck. But
sure, the banned one.
Yeah, but so it just plays Sunder instead, which is return all lands to owner's hands.
Which is great in ACB because then all of a sudden you're playing the rest of them and drawing cards. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Maybe we should do an AC deck. We should do a high power deck tech at some point. That'd be really fun.
That would be fun.
Because I think that's...
Let us know in the comments if you
Yes,
think that
please
would be
let us know. Yeah, that would be fun for us, but if you wouldn't like it, don't tell us not to. And the last thing we're playing... Oh, sorry. The last thing we're playing here is just Dorks, the mana-fixing Dorks.
Cool. Which are like Birds of Paradise, Ignoble Hierarch for this deck because it's a Jund deck.
Yes, and the reason I think... So Ignoble Hierarch is the best one in this deck because it has Exalted, which I think people forget about a lot.
Works super well.
Yes, so I'll just read it really quick. It's 1 green for a 0/1 with Exalted, which means whenever a creature you control attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And then it taps for Jund colors, which is the only colors I need. But, pardon me, Exalted is incredibly good in this deck because a 3/3 is so much bigger than a 2/2, and often Tana is attacking alone. And so if I happen to not find anything else that's going to buff Tana, making her a 3/3 because I've had an Ignoble Hierarch just on board is so good.
Yeah,
it's so good.
Very cool. We love mana dorks that also have additional utility.
Yes, yeah, baby.
Okay, the next category is card advantage, and this is where we talk about smoothers, refillers, engines. What do you have in this deck?
So, for smoothers. I'm playing a couple. I'm playing notably one of the ones that I'm playing that honestly has not played. Because I've mostly goldfished this deck, to be completely frank, and we've played it a couple times. But
yeah, it's a relatively new deck.
It's a relatively new deck. I haven't hit this card at a relevant point, but I know it will be relevant at some point, and it is Bitter Reunion. Will you read Bitter Reunion?
I will, because this is actually a pet card of mine. I really like this card. This is 1 in a
one.
red for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, you draw 2 cards. It also has the activated ability, pay 1 mana, sacrifice Bitter Reunion, and creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. So I run this in my Mogar deck because I want to be able to loot big spells or rummage big spells away into the graveyard and then reanimate them and give them haste so that I can attack with them the same turn.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fact that it's a permanent-based Thrill of Possibility with upside is incredibly good. Like,
It's
it
so
just is... It's doing the same thing, but with some additional stuff. And when I was building this deck, I heard Kelton's voice in my head saying, Bitter Reunion, Bitter Reunion. And so I put it in this deck. And like I said, it hasn't... The secondary utility of giving creatures haste hasn't come up yet because of the way... The play pattern that I've been practicing in Goldfishing, which is play Tana, attack with Tana.
Yeah, and you get all the Saprolings after she's dealt combat damage, so it's not like you need to give a bunch of Saprolings haste to be able to attack and deal combat damage.
Yes. The situation, though, that I see this like being very useful in is when I have to cast an 8-mana Tana, and then I want to try to swing in for combat damage, and she doesn't have haste, right?
Yep.
Well, Bitter Reunion will help give her haste, and I think that's like holding up a Bitter Reunion for later when people have forgotten about it, and then...
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think it could be. I think it could be pretty good. So that's why it's still in the deck. And then some just what's playing Night's Whisper is just a good smoother. And I guess I should probably read Night's Whisper. And then would you want to read the other one, Deadly Dispute? We could show both of these probably together because they're pretty similar. Night's Whisper is 1 in a black for a sorcery. You draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. Just one of the best black draw smoother effects on the cheap.
Yep, and then Deadly Dispute is 1 in a black for an instant, adds an additional cost to cast a spell. Sacrifice an artifact or creature. You're going to have a lot of creatures to sacrifice in this deck, and then it lets you draw 2 cards and then create a treasure token.
This is actually a pet card of mine. This was printed originally in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms.
And immediately got very popular as a uncommon. Or no, common. It was like a $2 common.
It was like a $2 to $3 common. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. Because in standard it was just exceptionally good. Yeah. Like the fact that what I really like about spells like this and like things that are similar like Village Rites and stuff like that is that it's kind of a gotcha, right? Someone tries to throw a removal at one of your things, and instead of like a counter spell, like your thing's still gonna die, but then especially if it's like an exile spell, like a Swords to Plowshares, then you're like, my thing actually just dies, and I draw 2 cards and create a treasure token.
That's funny. I don't play it that way often enough. I don't play it as like a reaction to removal enough. I should do that more. I mostly just play it to just draw the cards.
It is. I mean, I think there are situations where you just want to run it out, right? You want to run it out, get some additional cards in your hand, and I definitely do that. And in this deck, I probably would, because I don't care about Tana getting exiled because she's just going to go to the command zone anyways.
Sure.
But I think there's a world where like you do play it that way, and in standard especially where there's not a command zone, it feels really good to have done that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So the next one here we have our engines. Will you read this first one for us, Kelton? This is one that I think is one. So first of all, was prohibitively priced for a very long time and has since been printed a lot, and I'm really excited that I get to run it now.
Three times in the last year. This is Oran Frostfang, 3 green for a 2/6 snow creature, snake. Attacking creatures you control have death touch. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Wow, so all of these 1/1 Saprolings get death touch and let you draw a card when people inevitably don't want to block them.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So this is like the better version, I think. Well, depending on the axis that you look at it, of Toski, which does the same thing.
I was going to say it does a good impression of Toski.
It does a good impression of Toski. But I think like better, right? Because it gives creatures death touch. Especially in this
instance where it's like a go wide 1/1 tokens deck. Yeah, it's really good.
Right. Where Toski has indestructible and can attack itself and won't die to board wipes. Like Toski, I think there's situations where Toski is just better, but fortunately I also run Toski in this deck.
Nice.
I just want a lot of these effects, but I do like Oran Frostfang especially because for a couple reasons. One, it makes people less likely to block Tana as well, and if I make Tana bigger, I get through for more trample damage, because I only have to deal the 1 damage to whatever creature's blocking to be able to.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Which is really good.
That's a cool little combo. That's sweet.
Yeah, I think it's really sweet. It's a really cool card, and everybody out there, it's $1.20 right now. It used to be like $10, as did Toski, and I think they're both under 5 because they've both been printed a ton. And I unfortunately bought them like right before they got reprinted.
Nice.
But
good timing.
Yeah, and so the next one here we bought a red. It's Yawgmoth Thran Physician. Great draw engine in this deck. Also has some other utility. It's a card that it's one of the best cards in any Aristocrat style strategy, and is a great way to get value off of our Saprolings, because ultimately they are 1/1s, and we can swing wide, and we can do a lot of great stuff with them. But we can also use them to draw cards and start shrinking relevant creatures on our opponent's board.
It basically just lets you throw your Saprolings at things.
Yeah, it does.
Really cool.
Permanently, right? Throw them at them, and then save them for later to be like, okay, your thing's now a 1/1. I don't care if I kill it this turn. Maybe I'll kill it at instant speed later.
That's sweet.
Very cool card. And the next one here is Corvold, another great engine, but also a big beater, right? So kind of pulls double duty in the deck. And then, do you want to read this last one?
The last one on your list, is Moldervine Reclamation. This is 3 black, green for an enchantment. It's a little expensive, but I do think that it's worth it. It's whenever a creature you control dies, you gain life and you draw a card. I've seen this card do so much work at a commander table.
It's really expensive, and...
Expensive mana value-wise.
Mana value-wise, yeah, it's a cheap card, monetarily. The reason this card has not gotten me value in previous decks that I've built is because I've been too greedy to develop further board state and not played it, slammed it down once I've had 5 mana, for the most part. And in this deck,
because you kind of do want this early.
Yeah, you do, and you're making enough tokens that even if turn 3 you play Tana for 4 mana, and then turn 4 you have 5 mana, and you don't have something to buff Tana, sometimes it's a tough choice between playing something to buff Tana and get more Saprolings, or if there's an open attack, playing Moldervine Reclamation and just getting 2 Saprolings, because then if someone board wipes, you're like, sweet, I'm just going to draw 3 cards and be on my merry way. It's just really good, and the life gain is not irrelevant, especially in a Jund deck where you're going to be paying life for some effect.
Yeah, that's cool.
And often swinging out and leaving yourself unblocked. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say the last category that you have in card advantage is All-Stars. You have 1 card in here. Tell us about this All-Star of a card.
So this is one that I just barely put in the deck because I took out some other cards that in my playtesting weren't performing very well. And this is an All-Star because, again, it's pulling double duty, although your opponents get to choose. But I still think it's very good, and it Seize the Spotlight. Seize the Spotlight is 2 and a red for a sorcery that says each opponent chooses Fame or Fortune. For each player who chose Fame, gain control of a creature that player controls until end of turn, which you get to choose, which is awesome. Untap those creatures, they gain haste until end of turn. And then for each player who chose Fortune, you draw a card and create a treasure token.
Very cool.
Which is a ton of value. If no one wants to give you their creatures, you draw 3 cards and create 3 treasures. That's obviously magical Christmas land. Someone's going to give you a token, like a creature token or something.
Well, except for you got to choose which creature.
Except you get to choose which creature. So yeah, but someone might just have tokens or whatever. Or they might have something dumb. But if they don't give you creatures, it opens up attacks for Tana. So it kind of is doing a lot. It's doing a lot of work in this deck, and I really like it. Which is why it's an All-Star. It's not going to draw me the most cards of any of these, but it can draw you. It's not irrelevant in the card draw world, and also lets you get some more value from Tana potentially. So hence it being an All-Star in this deck.
Awesome. So the next category that we're going to talk about is interaction. You have a few pieces of interaction that are just mostly cheap, efficient interaction, not necessarily super reliant or they don't contribute much to the synergy of the deck.
Yeah, I place some of just the best interaction pieces in these colors, which are Assassin's Trophy and Terra Sunder. They're pretty. I mean, I guess we might as well read them, but we'll show some of the other ones. We'll read these 2 as examples and then show some of the other ones as some of the more efficient ones. So this is Assassin's Trophy, which is black-green for an instant. Destroy target permanent an opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle.
And then Terra Sunder is 1 and a green for an instant with kicker 1 and a black. Exile target artifact or enchantment. If this spell is kicked, exile target non-land permanent instead.
Pretty sweet that it's an exile effect in green for a permanent, which is really
that
cool.
is cool.
Just very good. And the other ones I'm running here are like Tragic Slip, Dismember is an incredibly good one, and then one of the ones that's kind of on theme here is Artifact Mutation, which is
cool.
Red green for an instant, destroy target artifact. Only hits artifacts, but you create X 1/1 green sapling creature tokens where X is that artifact's mana value, and
really
also that
fun.
artifact.
I like that include a lot.
Isn't it fun? Yeah. So like baseline, like worst case scenario, you hit someone's Soul Ring and create 1 sapling, but like you could hit someone's Bolas' Citadel and create 6. Like that's pretty sweet.
That's cool.
I've started to try to run more interaction that even if it only hits like 1 type, because you're going to find a card of that type that someone plays that you're like, oh no, I need to be able to hit this. So and then the next type of interaction we're running here are protections and buffs. Because why? Tana is small. Tana is very small and core to our game plan. So most of the protection spells I'm running here, I'm only running protection spells that also have the secondary benefit of making Tana bigger. So the first one here is Snakeskin Veil. Will you read Snakeskin Veil, Kelton?
1 green mana for an instant. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end of turn.
It's great. Not going to protect Tana from board wipes, but we're okay with Tana dying from a board wipe. We just want to protect her from targeted removal, and she gets bigger, which is great for us because we want to create more saplings. And then we have Gaia's Gift, which does a similar thing. Put a +1. It's 1 and a green for an instant. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains reach, trample, hexproof, and indestructible till end of turn. So 1 more colorless to give it a lot more keywords. But still,
and then you also have.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say you also have Tyvar Stand.
Yes. Which, sorry, the one thing I was going to say about Gaia's Gift is it also does a permanent +1/+1 counter, which I'm really excited about, meaning Tana permanently gets bigger. But Tyvar Stand is in here, which I think is also very good. 1 mana protection. Tyvar Stand is X and a green for an instant. Target creature you control gets +X/+X until end of turn, and gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So you can play this for just green and protect Tana, but you can also swing in with Tana, and if someone tries to remove her and you have open mana, you can protect Tana and make her massive to create a bunch of saplings, which I think is really fun.
That is really cool. Yeah, cool little synergy there.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other type of interaction we're running here, we already talked about Yawgmoth, great for just sacrificing our saplings for value. And then the last one here is kind of a flavor win. It's Zot's Will. Will you read Zot's Will, Kelton? I'm making you read the long ones.
4 and a black for an instant. Choose 1. If you control a commander as you cast the spell, you may choose both. So the first mode is each opponent sacrifices a creature they control with the greatest power. Pretty good. And the second mode is exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. Then you create X01 black Thrall creature tokens, where X is the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way.
Yes. So edicts are generally not particularly good as removal when you're trying to hit a specific target. But this is generally going to get rid of the biggest threat for the most part. Like, obviously, that's not always going to be the case, but it'll get rid of some pretty big threats. And if you control Tana or Tevesh, which is pretty cool, if you control either commander, or anyone else's commander, if through Tevesh somehow, which is kind of cool, you can choose both, and then you also get to exile everyone's graveyards, create a bunch of stuff that you can sacrifice to either Tevesh or other stuff that cares about sacrificing. So
very cool. Well, it looks like you've eaten your vegetables with this deck. It seems like you have all the right ramp, card advantage, and interaction pieces to make sure it plays smoothly.
I really tried to. This is like you were building Brago. This is the one that I was working on pretty heavily while we were working on our power levels episodes and our deck building episodes. And so this has taken a lot of work, actually. Like I felt like you put a lot of work into Brago, and I feel like I put a lot of work in this deck to try to make it perform well and do what I want it to do pretty consistently in goldfishing. So hopefully it also does it in a 4-player game of Commander.
I've gotten to play against this deck a few times already, and it is fun to play against.
It's pretty fun. I hope it's fun to play against because it's trying to be mid-power and fun. But I want to get into we've talked about the vegetables. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of the deck, which is all of the really fun deck-specific cards and the ways we're going to make Tana massive and deal combat damage. And the first category here is buffing Tana so she's not virtually a vanilla 2/2. And the best one.
The amount that you're downplaying Tana here is just awesome.
No,
she's just a vanilla 2/2.
Okay.
She's a 4-mana 2/2.
So I understand how it feels like downplaying. And as soon as she gets buffed, she is insane. Like I'm not going to downplay the fact that when she's an 8/8, it's legitimately scary. But like I feel like this is true for
all I'm saying is this is some good pro Tana propaganda.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm definitely on Team Tana trying to make sure people don't want to remove Tana. But I feel like this is true for quite a few commanders, is that when you're on the opposite side of the table, the commander feels very scary. But when you're playing the commander, it's easy for your commander to feel very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so
And Tana is vulnerable early game before she gets
super vulnerable. So that's me not projecting, please don't remove Tana. It's me projecting, when I play this deck, it feels very scary to try to do anything with Tana until she's big.
Yep, so let's make her bigger.
Some of the best things for making her big, the best one, I think, the best one in this deck, bar none, is Minsk and Boo Timeless Heroes. I'll read this one. You've read a lot of long ones. I'm going to read this one really quick, but let me first make sure I'm not going to have a coughing fit during it. Minsk and Boo Timeless Heroes is 2 red, green for a legendary planeswalker Minsk with 3 loyalty. When Minsk and Boo Timeless Heroes enters the battlefield, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may create Boo, a legendary 1/1 red hamster creature token with trample and haste, which is sweet because you can also sacrifice Boo to some of your stuff, and you get a new one at your upkeep, which is cool. The +1 for Minsk and Boo has 2 abilities. +1, put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature with trample or haste. Guess who's got his trample? Our friend Tana. And then its -2 is sacrifice a creature. When you do, Minsk and Boo Timeless Heroes deals X damage to any target, where X is that creature's power. If that creature was a hamster, draw X cards. And also, Minsk and Boo Timeless Heroes can be your commander. So if you're looking for a cool Gruul deck, then you should play Minsk and Boo.
It is a cool deck, yeah.
Yeah. So rarely are we going to be using Minsk and Boo's -2. Minsk and Boo is in my list of 15 card advantage pieces because I can draw cards with Minsk and Boo in a dire situation. But it is its main job in the deck is to make Tana permanently bigger. The fact that it puts 3 +1/+1 counters means Tana goes from a 2/2 to a 5/5 to an 8/8 to an 11/11, and things can just really get out of control.
Sure, and what's cool is that if you play Tana turn 3, if you've ramped, and you play Minsk and Boo on turn 4, you can buff Tana, swing in, deal combat damage with trample, create a sapperlings that then protect Minsk and Boo so that you can activate the ability again the next turn.
Yeah, and Boo also is there. Boo also is there just to protect Minsk as well.
Just get Boo.
Which is pretty sweet. So if you don't swing with Boo, you do have a ton of stuff to protect Minsk and Boo. And we're not going to talk about all of them, but I do run several other Planeswalkers because they're a great thing to have on board that typically won't also get removed with Tana for when I get to cast Tana again, inevitably, hopefully. And what's great about Tana is she does, and it's true for all of those Planeswalkers, that she creates the sapperlings that can protect those Planeswalkers from getting removed. The second all-star in this deck in terms of buffing Tana is Helena and Elena Partners.
Yeah, so in the times that I have played against this deck, you've gotten this card out and I have removed it with extreme prejudice. I think this is really powerful. This is 2 red-green for a 2/3 human ranger. First strike, reach. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you put X 1/1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is Helena and Elena's power. That creature gains haste until end of turn.
Yes. The 2 things that are super relevant, are its entire ability, but the fact that it gives it haste and permanent buff is incredibly, incredibly good, which means in this instance, this is where I'd want to play into an unsuspecting play group. I'd want to play Helena and Elena turn 3 because Tana can swing in turn 4 and be bigger because she can have haste at that point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You did play this turn 3, and I did remove it.
And you removed it. Because because you saw what was coming.
We saw that coming a mile away.
Yeah, it's not. This deck is incredibly telegraphed in what it's trying to do.
It's not subtle.
No,
yeah, Jund is not subtle.
No, but the hope is that you can slam through still.
Yeah, it was great, and it did. It did great.
Yeah, it does really well. And the dream here actually is that we can get Halana and Elena out, and then before we move to combat, actually put one of our buffs on Halana and Elena to then put more counters on Tana, which just makes it an incredibly good combo in this deck.
Yep.
And the last one here is one of my favorite includes because it's a background, and I'm playing a couple backgrounds in this deck, and they've played exceptionally well so far with Tana. Again, because Tana likely will get removed, and we want to be able to have the things that are making her powerful stick on board. And I don't know why, equipment, I don't want to have to pay an equip cost in addition to the commander tax that I'm going to be playing for Tana.
You're trying to go fast, and there's not a way to cheat the equipment very easily in this deck.
Yeah, exactly. So this one is Cultist of the Absolute, which is a legendary enchantment for a single black. It is a background, and it says commander creatures you own get +3/+3 and have flying, death touch. Oh, there's a fly on my head. It landed right on my head. I'm so sorry.
It heard you say flying from Cultist.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolute.
Get out of here. I thought it was on my screen, and I realized it was on my hat. Okay, we're starting over on that one. Commander creatures you own get +3/+3 and have flying, death touch, ward, pay 3 life, and at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. Mm-hmm. This does incredibly well with Tana because it makes Tana bigger, evasive, and makes it harder for people to target Tana. Not significantly harder because you have a ton of life in Commander, but it's a little bit harder.
And you do have to play this after you play Tana, right?
Yes, that's what I was going to say, is that this is not something you want to run out turn 1 and then play Tana into an empty board state. This is play Tana. This follows the play pattern of play Tana and then play something to buff Tana thereafter so that you have saprolings to sacrifice.
Or in this case, maybe 2 things because Cultist of the Absolute is so cheap.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Which you probably can do. And hopefully it's one of these other favorites for buffing. The next 3 are some of my favorites for buffing Tana, though they may not be the most powerful effects for buffing Tana.
Yeah, the first one you have here is Invigorating Hot Spring. This is from the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set. It's really cool. It's 1 red, green for an enchantment. It enters the battlefield with 4/1/1 counters on it. Modified creatures you control have haste, and you can remove a 1/1 counter from Invigorating Hot Spring to put a 1/1 counter on a target creature you control, and you can activate only as a sorcery and only once each turn.
This is probably... So as I was building this deck, I kept thinking, okay, what do I want to do? Okay, I want to buff Tana. I want to buff her permanently so she continues to get bigger. And I want to be able to swing with her the turn that I play her. And my mind was racing, and Invigorating Hot Springs just jumped into my brain. And it does all of those things. I was able to play it in like a limited thing on Arena a little while ago, and I remembered it and thought, holy crap, this is exactly what I'm looking for. It's one of my favorite cards that came from my own like digging of like what could be a good card to include in this deck.
One thing that I think is cool about this card is initially it looks very awkward at 3 mana because you generally want to be playing Tana on turn 3, but because it gives modified creatures haste, you can play this first and then play Tana, and Tana's still swinging in on turn 4, which is really cool. And it kind of replaces a mana rock, right? If you have a hand that has this but no mana rock, you're still swinging with Tana on turn 4.
Yes, and in like a dream scenario, if I happen to have a mana dork in this, I'm swinging with Tana on turn 3, which is really, really good. So it's one of my favorite includes in the deck because of that. I think it does pretty well. The next one here is, again, another one of my favorites. Such a cool card. It is Death Greeter's Champion. Death Greeter's Champion is 2 and a red for a 2/1. It has dash for 3 and a red. So dash is that you can cast it for its dash cost, and if you do, it gains haste, and then you return it from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. It has backup 1. So for those who don't remember or have never heard of it, backup 1 says whenever this creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. If it's another creature, it gains the following ability till end of turn, and that ability is Double Strike.
Cool.
Which is so sweet because, again, it is permanently buffing Tana. It is repeatable because I can dash it out and I don't have to attack with it. And on the first turn I play this, it makes Tana a 3/3 with Double Strike, which is so much stats. And we'll be able to get through... And trample. And we'll be able to get through most blockers. And effectively is a 6/6 damage-wise for the trample damage that it's putting through.
Awesome include in this deck.
That's really cool.
The last one that you have in this section is Agent of the Shadow Thieves. This is another background. It's 1 and a black for a legendary enchantment. Commander creatures you own have whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than that player, you put a 1/1 counter on that creature. It gains Death Touch and indestructible until end of turn.
Again, so cool. People are not going to want to multi-block into this because they can't kill Tana. Hopefully Tana's pretty big. And again, the Death Touch means that you can deal 1 damage and then trample through for the rest. So,
yeah, Death Touch, Trample, Indestructible is a very potent combination of keywords.
It's really strong. And again, it's giving a permanent +1/+1 counter each time. Like, it's not just buffing it temporarily, which is super important for this deck because you want Tana to just continuously get bigger and bigger and bigger.
And with the buff that you're getting with Death Touch, with Indestructible, you don't really care which player you're attacking. So it's okay if you're attacking just always the opponent with the most life.
Yeah, absolutely. And chances are, like, if they're playing a token strategy, then like, okay, they're gonna chump block with a token. But if they do, you deal trample damage, right? So they have to block with several.
That's great.
And if they're like playing giant creatures, they're not going to want to block with any of them. And even if they do, you're getting through for trample damage because you have Death Touch. So it's
awesome.
I think it's a really fun include in this deck. That is our buff Tana strategy. The next strategy here, we're reaching a critical mass of time in this episode. So we'll go through these ones quickly. But our secondary strategy is make more saplings. So we're including a bunch of cards, or not a bunch, but several. Only really, let me rephrase this. We want to make more saplings. Tana does that very, very well, and so we're only really including the best sapling cards as like a secondary strategy here.
And we already mentioned Slimefoot and Squee, but this is one of the ones that you've included in the 99.
Yeah, Slimefoot Squee, I think one of the best sapling cards. One of the reasons we wanted black in this deck because it's just a great card. The next one here is Namada Primeval Warden. Really cool card. One of my favorites from Dominaria United. It's 2 green-black. For a 3/4, it has reach. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. When you do, you create a 1/1 green sapling creature token. So an excellent stacks piece in addition to creating 1/1 saplings. And then it has, for a green, sacrifice a sapling. Namada Primeval Warden gets +2/+2 until end of turn. And for a 1 and a black, you can sacrifice 2 saplings and draw a card. Again, this is included in my card advantage pieces. Yeah, but it's pulling double duty as a sapling token. Yeah, exactly.
That's sweet. The next one that you have on this list is Michaeloth, 3 green for a 4/4 fungus that has Devour 2. So as it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice any number of creatures, and it enters the battlefield with twice that many 1/1 counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token for each 1/1 counter on Michaeloth.
Yep, so hopefully we have a decent amount of saplings prior to casting Michaeloth.
Yeah. It's just going to double that number of saplings every one of your turns.
Every upkeep, which is insane. And the last two here are 2 of the best sapling creators. We'll start with the better of the 2, which is Tendershoot Dryad. It is 4 and a green for a creature Dryad 2/2 with Ascend, which means if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing for the rest of the game, which is not hard when we're creating saplings. And it says, at the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature token, and as long as you have the City's Blessing, saplings you control get +2/+2. Yeah, making our saplings very big.
This goes crazy. Yeah, and the other one is the worst but still great version of this, of Tendershoot Dryad. Verdant Force is 5 green for a 7/7. With the ability at the beginning of each upkeep, you create a 1/1 green sapling creature token.
Yeah, the fact that each of those says at the beginning of each upkeep is crazy, because that's for a turn cycle, which is insane. And if I have any of the things that are granting me value off of like sacrificing at will, which again, there aren't many, but if I do happen to have any of those, then you're getting a lot of value off of that, which is really cool. Our last strategy is to actually get value from our saplings. So that's how we're going to be generating advantage and potentially winning the game. The first of those The first two of those being things we already talked about, Yawgmoth, Thran Physician, and Corvold, Fakehurst King. Just black aristocrats and Jund aristocrats all-stars. Hence this being a Jund all-stars deck. Just really good pieces. The next one is a really exciting one from Karlov Manor that I've been wanting to play, and this felt like the perfect deck for it. Kelsey, you want to tell us about it?
Insidious Roots is black-green for an enchantment. It has creature tokens you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color, and whenever one or more creature cards leave your graveyard, you create a 0/1 plant creature token. Then you put a +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. You're really mostly just concerned about the first line of this, right?
Yep. This gives our Saprolings alternative value outside of being just attacking into people or being sacrificed. Yeah. That's a really cool card. I think it's quite good. I'm really excited about it. The next one here is a classic token / aristocrats piece. Goblin Bombardment. 1 and a red for an enchantment. Sacrifice a creature. Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to any target.
Start throwing those Saprolings.
Yeah, really good. And a really good way. I wanted some of these sacrifice effects in here. I originally had Phyrexian Altar in here, but I since took it out. Because it didn't feel like it was contributing to the strategy of the deck very much, but I did want that or Goblin Bombardment in this deck. I think Goblin Bombardment is the better version of that for this deck, specifically because in the instance of a board wipe, I want to be able to garner some value from my Saprolings that I've created.
Sure. And also, if you create enough Saprolings, you can just throw them all, because Goblin Bombardment is any target. So you can just throw them at a player and take out a player.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I think it's pretty good.
The next one on the list is Dragon Broodmother. This is 2 red, 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 green. A little bit of an intensive mana cost there for a 4/4 dragon with flying. And at the beginning of each upkeep, you put a 1/1 red and green dragon creature token with flying and devour 2 into play. So, like Michaeloth, it's the one where when it comes into play, you can sacrifice a creature, any number of creatures, and you put twice that many 1/1 counters on it.
Yeah, so like the dream here would be that you have, obviously a ton of tokens, or this and like Tendershoot Dryad on the battlefield.
Cool.
And so each upkeep, you create a Saproling, and then you create a 1/1 that eats the Saproling. Is now a 3/3 flying dragon.
Which is a major upgrade.
Yeah, I think it's pretty sweet. And the last one here is one that I really like and I've wanted to play in a deck for a long time, and I think will do well in this deck. I find myself having a hard time wanting to cast it until like later in the game, but I do think it's very, very good. And it's Perforos, God of the Forge, which is 3 and a red for a legendary enchantment creature god. It's a 6/5 with Indestructible, which is super, super relevant, and I forget about all the time. It says, as long as your devotion to red is less than 5, Perforos isn't a creature. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent.
Oh my gosh.
So in an ideal world, we deal 5 damage, maybe with Tana, and then each of our opponents take 10 damage from the 5 Saprolings that enter. Yeah,
that's a lot of damage.
It's pretty good. It's one of the ways we're trying to kill people is by pinging them to death with our Saprolings that enter the battlefield.
I love it. Spencer, this is a cool deck list. Thank you so much for walking us through it. We'd love to hear what you think. What cards do you think Spencer should add or consider for this deck list? And we're always looking for feedback on this format as well, since this is only the second deck tech that we've done.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be linking this deck in our Mox Field. Our Mox Field is always linked. We get questions about our Mox Field pretty regularly. It is linked permanently in our channel. So if you go to our channel description, you'll see it there. We will link this deck specifically in the description, so it'll make it easier to find. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This was really fun. Thanks for indulging me while I talked for an hour about the Tana Tevesh Tiny Token Tour. I've been really excited about this deck, and I'm excited to play it, and hopefully play some of you with it at some point.
That's awesome. Well, thank you all for listening. Next week, we will have a new episode for you, so join us. Make sure you subscribe to get notified whenever we have a new episode out. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and we're continuing to expand to wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us at thecommanderpod.com. Visit us there to get in touch with us. And until next time, remember to always pay the one.